Welcome to the Lowdown. This is an AI-generated open-source news summary for general informational awareness. This product is not intended for use as official intelligence. The views expressed here are solely those of the cited authors and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Department of War, the United States Air Force, or any other U.S. government agency. So, moving right into today's deep dive, usually when we talk about war and peace, there's this expectation of a binary switch.
Right.
Like light in a room, it's either on and you're in the dark reality of conflict, or it's off and you're bathed in this comforting glow of peace.
Yeah, we culturally really crave that clean categorization. I mean, the assumption is that once treaties are signed or memorandums are agreed upon, the switch is flipped and the danger is past.
Exactly. But then you look at the geopolitical landscape of August 2026, which is what we're looking at today, and suddenly that switch it's just broken. Okay. We're looking at a global environment that is completely murky. The sources we're diving into today, they actually prove that the absolute most dangerous phase of a conflict is often when it looks like everyone has agreed to stop fighting.
I'd give a bottom line up front for this operational period right here. The defining illusion of modern statecraft is this supposed peace that actually just masks aggressive preparation. So across the AORs, the areas of responsibility we're tracking, whether it's the Middle East, Russia, or the Indo-Pacific, we are seeing state actors actively exploit diplomatic pauses. They are reorganizing internal security, securing vulnerable supply chains, and, testing asymmetric warfare tactics, all while publicly projecting de-escalation.
Right. Okay, let's unpack that, because our mission on this deep dive is to connect the dots across those three major theaters you mentioned. So the Middle East, Russia, and Eastern Europe, and China and Taiwan. We are looking at this massive stack of intelligence updates, geopolitical analyses, open source military reporting. And the hidden global theme weaving through all of this is how nations use that illusion of diplomacy, economic coercion, and periods of supposed calm to prepare for these massive shifts in power.
Uncovering that requires looking past, the official handshakes and the press conferences to really see the underlying logistics, the domestic crackdowns, and the internal military reorganizations.
Yes. The most immediate illusion of calm, mid-June 2026.
Yeah.
We're at the French Palace of Versailles. President Trump and Iran sign a memorandum of understanding in USMOU aimed at reopening the Strait of Hormuz and winding down the conflict. And on paper, it looks like a diplomatic breakthrough.
Right.
But our sources show that behind closed doors, Iran's hardline leaders saw this very, very differently.
Yeah, they did. Washington viewed the MOU as a legitimate step toward de-escalation. But Tehran's hardline leadership viewed it strictly as a tactical pause. In their eyes, the U.S. and Israel were experiencing war fatigue,
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and they were simply trying to take the pressure off the global economy just to buy time. So instead of genuinely pursuing a lasting peace, Iran used this 2-month window to prepare for a much bigger, more decisive fight.
Okay, so it's like halftime in a football game.
Sure.
But instead of resting and drinking Gatorade, Iran went into the locker room, completely changed their playbook, and basically swapped out their entire defensive line for an aggressive offensive one.
Yeah, but even a locker room halftime doesn't really quite capture the scale of this. Supreme Leader Khamenei wasn't just swapping players. He was rewriting the rules of the regime to assume a permanent war footing. He moved some key chess pieces with, honestly, extreme prejudice.
Like who?
Well, first, he appointed Mohsen Rezai to the Supreme National Security Council. Rezai is a hardened, uncompromising veteran of the 1980s Iran-Iraq War.
Okay.
Then he brought in Hossein Taib to head up the Basij. Taib is a man known for leading brutal internal crackdowns during the 2009 protests.
Wait, but the Basij is traditionally just a volunteer paramilitary militia?
Right.
Right. So why put a brutal internal security guy in charge of them now?
Because Taib's mandate was to essentially turn that massive volunteer militia into a formalized, neighborhood-level domestic intelligence network.
Oh, wow.
When you're planning to escalate a war externally, your biggest vulnerability is domestic unrest at home. So Taib was brought in to literally lock down the civilian population before the external fireworks started.
And the fireworks were definitely being planned.
Oh, absolutely.
Because Ahmad Vahidi was formally made the commander-in-chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, and his official decree literally tasked him with, quote, powerful offensive operations against the enemy.
Yeah.
You don't appoint specialists in internal repression and external offensive operations if you are planning to integrate peacefully into the global economy.
Exactly. You make those appointments when your baseline assumption is total conflict.
Right. And we immediately saw the kinetic results of this rearming. We saw Houthi strikes on the city of Mokta in Yemen.
Right, killing at least 11 people and damaging the port.
Yeah. And then Iranian ballistic missiles hitting Jordan, completely evading layered air defenses, and strikes on United Arab Emirates ships trying to transit the Strait of Hormuz. But here's where the narrative really shifts. The UAE did not just issue a standard diplomatic condemnation. They dropped a massive economic hammer.
You really did. The UAE announced they were halting all trade and financial transactions with Iran. And to understand the sheer scale of that retaliation, you really have to look at the regional mechanics. The UAE isn't just a geographical neighbor, right? It's the vital economic lifeline keeping Tehran afloat.
Yeah, the numbers in the reports are staggering.
Yeah.
The UAE supplies roughly 37% of Iran's essential imports, things that keep the country's basic infrastructure running. But even more critically, the UAE is the central hub for Iran's shadow banking and their sanctions evasion networks. The report says approximately 80% of Iran's imported foreign exchange comes through the UAE.
80%. I mean, the Emiratis essentially turned off the tap for foreign currency in an economy that is already buckling under hyperstress.
But let me push back here for a second, because this seems contradictory to me.
Okay.
If the UAE cutting off trade is such a massive, devastating economic blow to Iran's imports and their currency, won't that force Iran back to the negotiating table just out of sheer financial desperation?
Yeah.
Like, how long can a country functionally hold out when 80% of its foreign exchange is frozen?
That's a great question. And Western logic assumes that acute economic pain forces rational diplomatic concessions.
Right.
But Iran is operating on a totally different risk calculus. They are employing what strategists call salami slicing tactics.
Salami slicing?
Yeah. This means utilizing incremental limited escalations, taking a tiny slice of the salami at a time designed to slowly bleed the adversary without triggering an all-out regime-ending war.
Oh, okay.
The hardline faction, especially under Vahidi, is proving they are willing to endure immense, even catastrophic, domestic economic pain if it means achieving their ultimate strategic objective. And that objective is securing total, unquestioned control over the Strait of Hormuz.
So they'll let their domestic economy burn to the ground as long as they get to hold the keys to the world's primary oil transit route.
Yes. And to insulate themselves from that economic burn, they are aggressively locking their neighbors into compliance. Just look at Iraq.
Okay.
Iraqi Prime Minister Zaidi was feeling immense heat from the U.S. to disarm Iranian-backed militias operating in his country. He was actually planning to send Iraq security forces into Jerf al-Sakar, which is a major militia stronghold, to clear it out.
Right.
But at the 11th hour, he totally caved. He downgraded the operation from a clearing mission to merely monitoring the area.
But Zaidi didn't just cave in a vacuum, right? The reports show high-level Iranian figures, including the Iranian parliament speaker, Ghalibaf. They showed up in Baghdad right before this decision.
Exactly.
It looks like a classic protection racket.
Yeah.
Iran secures the safety of their proxy militias in exchange for taking control of Iraq's oil transit.
Because the oil transit is the ultimate prize in that Baghdad meeting. Ghalibaf was pushing a sweeping economic mandate. He was demanding that Iraq export its oil through the Strait of Hormuz under explicit Iranian protection. You have to remember, oil accounts for up to 90% of Iraq's total government revenue.
Wow. 90%.
Right. If Iran dictates the terms of that export route, they permanently tether Iraq's entire national economy to Tehran's orbit.
So Iran's strategy is to endure massive economic pain to secure physical choke points and regional dominance. But what happens when a country doesn't just endure domestic pain, but actively cannibalizes its own infrastructure to wage a shadow war?
Yeah.
Which brings us to Russia's current crisis.
The contrast between Russia's projected domestic reality and its actual internal decay is, frankly, one of the most glaring geopolitical contradictions we're seeing right now.
Let me bring in an analogy here.
Yeah.
That's like the classic duck on a pond, right?
Okay, yeah.
Above the water, they're trying to look like they're just gliding smoothly. Publicly, Vladimir Putin is bragging about a, quote, modest 1% GDP growth. He's broadcasting to the public that everything is fine ahead of the September State Duma elections. They even orchestrated a 103-person POW exchange with Ukraine just to show things are normal. But underneath the water, they were paddling frantically just to keep the country running.
Yeah, paddling is putting it mildly. The open source data tells a completely different story. Gasoline is available at only 28% of Russian gas stations.
That's crazy.
And that includes Moscow, the elite, wealthy areas the Kremlin usually tries to insulate from the realities of the war. They're running dry.
Unpacking why that fuel shortage is happening reveals this fascinating domino effect deep within their industrial base. Ukraine has been executing a highly effective deep strike campaign using long-range drones. They hit the Ufer oil refining hub, which is 1,200 kilometers away from the Ukrainian border, and they struck the Progress Space Launch Center in Samara, which builds vital Soyuz engines.
Right. And because of those refinery strikes crippling their output, the Russian government made a desperate regulatory move. They issued a decree allowing refineries to produce much lower octane gasoline just to get something liquid to the civilian pumps.
Just to keep people from panicking.
Exactly. But here is the brutal chemistry of it all. To make that low-octane gas, refineries have to forcefully reallocate compounds called aromatic hydrocarbons.
Okay, and why does that matter?
Well, the industrial trade-off there is paralyzing. Aromatic hydrocarbons aren't just additives for gasoline. They are the essential, foundational chemical inputs required to manufacture motor oil, synthetics, rubbers, and advanced defense-related polymers.
Oh, wow.
So by artificially trying to fix the gasoline shortage at the pumps to pacify civilian drivers, the Russian state is literally cannibalizing the raw materials needed to make motor oil for their tanks and military plastics for their defense sector. It's compounding the crisis across multiple industries.
Wait, so they're burning their own defense materials? It's like burning the floorboards of your house to keep the fireplace going.
Yes, exactly.
It makes the living room look warm and inviting to the neighbors looking through the window, but structurally, the entire house is on the verge of collapsing.
Yeah.
It's gotten so bad that Putin had to deploy Rosgvardia, the heavily militarized internal security forces, to gas stations in Moscow Oblast just to manage the public unrest and prevent riots.
Yet, despite the domestic infrastructure physically crumbling around them, the Kremlin is expanding its shadow wars, particularly in occupied Ukraine and neighboring Moldova.
The level of control they are exerting in occupied Ukraine is chilling, especially the digital surveillance. Russian occupation courts are handing down 12 to 14-year prison sentences to local women for tiny digital donations to Ukrainian forces.
Right.
We're talking about digital bank transfers of $29 and $687.
Yeah.
14 years in a penal colony for that.
It's a demonstration of total digital and financial capture. Handing down a draconian sentence for $29 isn't just about punishing one individual. It is about sending a psychological shockwave through the entire occupied population.
Just to terrify them.
Exactly. It proves to them that every keystroke, every cent they move is monitored. And they are pairing this physical and digital repression with deep sociocultural engineering.
Right, like the Zemsky teacher program.
Right.
They are importing Russian teachers from the mainland into occupied Ukraine.
Yeah, that program is a highly effective tool for erasing national identity. By importing state-vetted teachers, they control the curriculum. They are teaching out of new, state-approved history books that reframe the illegal annexation as a historical rescue mission.
Wow.
They are also running military patriotic summer camps, teaching Ukrainian youth how to pilot attack drones.
Oh my God.
It's a calculated, multi-generational indoctrination meant to ensure that even if Russia loses physical ground, the next generation is psychologically tethered to Moscow.
But it doesn't stop in Ukraine. What they are doing in Moldova feels like something out of a Cold War spy novel.
It really does. Moldova is incredibly strategic. It's geographically squeezed between NATO members and Ukraine, and it currently has a pro-Western government under President Maia Sandu that is actively pushing for European Union membership.
Right.
The Kremlin views Moldovan integration with the West as an unacceptable loss of their historical sphere of influence.
So they activated an exiled Moldovan billionaire named Ilan Shor. And through his financial networks, Russian GRU operatives, which is Russia's military intelligence agency, they literally set up training camps in Serbia and Bosnia.
Yeah.
They brought in young Moldovans and taught them how to use explosives, riot tactics, and how to physically break through police cordons. But they also went after the spiritual infrastructure, which is just wild.
It is a textbook application of hybrid warfare. They targeted the Moldovan Orthodox Church. Russian intelligence flew hundreds of Moldovan priests to Russia, gave them VIP tours of historical sites, and then, before sending them home, had them sign contracts for debit cards issued by Promsvya's bank.
Okay, what is Promsvya's bank?
That is a Russian state bank explicitly tied to the defense ministry.
They literally put hundreds of foreign priests on a Russian military payroll to push anti-Western, pro-Kremlin narratives from the pulpit every Sunday.
Right.
I mean, that is a staggering level of asymmetric warfare. But getting back to their domestic crisis, Russia is burning through resources so fast, they just struck a massive deal with North Korea.
They did.
Russia is investing heavily in a new North Korean refinery that can produce 300,000 tons of aviation fuel and diesel. In exchange, Russia gets 25,000 tons of petroleum products annually.
But wait, I have a specific question about this.
Sure.
With the severe immediate fuel shortages causing riots right now inside Russia, how does a facility in North Korea actually help them in the short term? Or is this purely a desperate long-term play?
You hit the nail on the head. It doesn't help them in the short term at all.
No. A heavy industrial refinery in North Korea cannot be built overnight. It will not put gas in a Moscow station next month. What this reveals is Moscow's deep, long-term anxiety. They are securing a petrochemical asset that is completely insulated and geographically out of range from Ukrainian drone strikes.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it shows the Kremlin is resigning itself to a prolonged, multi-year conflict and is willing to become economically tethered to Pyongyang just to guarantee a safe supply chain for the future.
Wow. So watching Russia self-cannibalize and Iran endure massive sanctions, it provides a lot of data.
Yeah.
And there is one country sitting back, watching these mistakes and meticulously taking notes.
Yep, China.
Right? Because while Russia and Iran are actively engaged in kinetic warfare and dealing with immediate domestic fires, China is quietly studying these conflicts and applying those lessons to its own regional expansion against Taiwan.
China's People's Liberation Army, the PLA, is acting as an incredibly diligent observer right now. They're intensely studying the U.S.-Israel-Iran conflict in the Middle East. They are analyzing the realities of large-scale unmanned attrition, the necessity of distributed operations, and most importantly, the brutal economics of modern warfare.
They're looking at the math. If someone fires a cheap $20,000 drone at your ship and you have to shoot it down with a $2 million interceptor missile, you might win that specific engagement, but you will rapidly lose the economic war.
Exactly. The exchange ratio is everything in modern saturation attacks. The PLA is actively trying to internalize these lessons, and we are getting a remarkable look at how their Navy is struggling with this, thanks to an extensive open-source compilation by military researcher Ken Allen.
Right.
He compared the English-language public relations documents from the PLA with their internal Chinese-language administrative documents from 2025.
Which is such a cool comparison. It is exactly like looking at a high-end restaurant. Yeah, the English documents are the pristine dining room menu. They show off all the Chinese achievements, the global overseas deployments, the humanitarian hospital ship missions, the brand new Fujian aircraft carrier successfully launching their J-15T jets, which are their newest carrier-based fighters.
Right.
But the internal Chinese documents, that is the chaotic kitchen doors swinging open.
That's a perfect analogy. The internal documents show the chefs yelling at each other while the plumbing leaks. When you read the Chinese sources, you see a Navy grappling with severe organizational growing pains. They document massive maintenance bottlenecks, advanced equipment failures that their crews can't repair at sea, and a dangerous over-reliance on highly scripted, predictable training exercises. They are desperately trying to shift toward realistic, unscripted system of systems integration.
But what does that actually mean for a sailor on a ship? System of systems?
Well, system of systems integration means breaking down the rigid, siloed walls of traditional military hierarchy. It means cross-training, so that if a ship takes a missile hit, a radar operator knows how to do emergency damage control, or an engineer understands how to temporarily reroute communications.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they are realizing that in a real war, the scripted plans fall apart in the first hour.
Taiwan clearly knows this too, because Taiwan just ran its annual Han Kuang military exercises, and for the first time they made them entirely unscripted.
Yes.
President Law even participated in a mock decapitation strike drill.
Wow.
Yeah, practicing how to maintain command if Beijing tried to wipe out the government leadership in a first wave. They also practice for total internet and communication disruption.
And Beijing's response to those exercises was swift and deeply sophisticated. They launched a first-of-its-kind autonomous AI cyber attack against Taiwanese infrastructure. Using open-source AI proxies known as Hermes and OpenClaw, suspected PRC hackers built an autonomous tool that didn't just run a pre-written code. It essentially acted like a living, thinking cyber team.
Okay, but how does an AI proxy actually map a system differently than a normal computer virus?
Well, a traditional cyber attack follows a script. If it hits a firewall, it either stops or tries a pre-programmed workaround. The AI proxy acts dynamically. It mapped 21 Taiwanese government systems, compromised accounts, and extracted records. But when Taiwan's cyber defenders threw up roadblocks, the AI autonomously analyzed the defense, learned from it, and adapted its own infiltration tactics in real time to bypass the block.
That is terrifying. It's a thinking weapon. And they are pairing this high-tech cyber warfare with relentless physical gray zone tactics. Gray zone tactics being those aggressive military or economic moves that stay just below the threshold of an open, declared war, making it really hard for the defender to justify shooting back.
Exactly. For example, when a typhoon rolled through the region, the PRC used the extreme weather as a pretext to unilaterally issue traffic controls in the Taiwan Strait. They are attempting to normalize their legal jurisdiction over international waters.
Just sneaking it in there.
Right. At the same time, they sent a research vessel called the Beidaihe to map the seabed near Palau and Guam, sailing in a methodical lawnmower pattern.
Basically measuring the water depth and underwater topography, gathering bathymetric data under the guise of civilian scientific research.
But mapping the ocean floor near Guam is exactly the prerequisite intelligence you need to track and counter U.S. nuclear submarines traveling from Guam to the South China Sea in the event of a Taiwan contingency. They are laying the groundwork for submarine warfare.
It's all meticulous preparation. They even meddled in local Taiwanese elections, like the Kaohsiung mayoral race, pumping in fake polling data to test if they can successfully manipulate public opinion before the 2028 national elections.
Yeah.
But Taiwan is not just sitting there taking it. In a rare moment of cross-partisan unity, Taiwan's legislature passed a full $2 billion budget to build up their domestic drone industry.
They recognize the exact same drone economics the PLA is studying in the Middle East. To that end, Taiwan partnered with a U.S. tech startup called Vatten Systems to build autonomous S-12 underwater vehicles.
S-12s, okay.
These are cheap, mass-producible, unmanned underwater vehicles, or UUVs. They carry 200-pound warheads and are designed to swarm and cripple a massive naval invasion fleet at a fraction of the cost of traditional torpedoes.
But building massive swarms of underwater drones requires highly specific, advanced materials, which perfectly explains the next move in the PRC's playbook.
Yeah, it really does.
China just drastically reduced its global rare earth exports. They dropped exports of vital minerals like gadolinium and terbium by 51% to Japan and 28% to the U.S. Gadolinium and terbium are the exact rare earth elements required to build the high-performance magnetic motors inside things like those autonomous S-12 underwater vehicles.
The linkage is direct. The PRC is using raw economic coercion to choke off the supply chain. They are reminding Taiwan and Washington that if you try to build a massive drone swarm to defend the island, Beijing can simply cut off the base materials required to manufacture those weapons, electric vehicles, and radar systems.
So wait, if China is actively learning from the drone attrition in the Middle East, how does Taiwan's new $2 billion drone budget and their undersea drone deal with the U.S. factor into China's timeline? Does this deter Beijing, or does it just speed up their AI cyber attacks? Because they're basically saying, we can't win a drone war, so we'll just use asymmetrical tools.
It absolutely accelerates Beijing's reliance on non-kinetic asymmetric warfare.
Really?
Yeah. The PLA knows a frontal naval assault across the strait is incredibly costly, especially against a swarm of 200-pound UUV warheads. So Taiwan's drone budget forces Beijing to double down on what we just outlined. AI-driven cyber attacks to blind the command structure, economic blockades via rare earths to halt production, and cognitive warfare during local elections to break the public's will.
Wow.
They want to win the war before the first physical shot is ever fired, rendering those thousands of Taiwanese drones completely useless because the networks required to launch them are already fried.
If we synthesize this incredible stack of intelligence, the through line is undeniable. The traditional lines between war, peace, economics, and information are completely gone. They are blurred beyond recognition. Every major player we looked at today is wielding asymmetric tools to prepare for the future.
Whether it's the UAE banning financial transactions to choke Iran's currency, Russian military intelligence putting Moldovan Orthodox priests on a bank payroll to spread propaganda, or Chinese autonomous AI cyber proxies adapting to Taiwanese power grids in real time.
And for you listening, this isn't just distant geopolitical theory. Modern conflict directly impacts your daily life. It dictates global shipping routes and what basic goods cost at your local store.
Yeah, absolutely.
It impacts technology supply chains. I mean, try buying affordable electronics when the rare earth exports required to make them suddenly drop by 50%. It even dictates whether there is gasoline at your neighborhood pump, as the Russian public is violently finding out right now. Being well-informed today means looking past the official diplomatic handshakes and the sanitized GDP reports to see the hidden logistics turning the gears.
It requires a fundamental understanding that periods of supposed peace are merely the logistical tail of the next conflict.
Which leaves you with a final thought to mull over. If the PLA is intensely studying drone attrition in the Middle East to prepare its strategy for Taiwan, and Russia is deeply relying on North Korea for future energy infrastructure to physically avoid strikes, are we witnessing the end of isolated regional conflicts? Are we instead watching the birth of a fully integrated global shadow war where every local skirmish, like something in the Red Sea, is simply a beta test for the world's major powers?
It's a sobering realization. The global system is vastly more interconnected in its vulnerabilities than it is in its strengths. A lesson learned in one theater is immediately weaponized in another.
So maybe that light switch we talked about at the very beginning, the one cleanly separating war and peace, maybe it isn't broken. Maybe it was just completely rewired while we weren't looking. And right now, it's connected to everything. Keep your eyes open. Until next time.